How you going, everybody? This is the NFL Brekkie Show, presented by the Next Gen Ford Everest Conquer. Every day in the Next Gen Ford Everest. That man is Laurie Horesh. The nondescript hotel room behind me is in Tampa. I am Phil Murphy. We are getting ready for Monday Night Football on this Tuesday morning between the Bucks and the Saints. Somebody, Laws, has to win the cacophonous quartet that is the NFC South. But while we're talking mediocrity, this is the time where the cream rises to the top, as they say, and some of the teams looking in form. But something you and I have discussed is that I don't want to say that second tier, but that tertiary tier of NFL team. Very few teams are climbing out of that into contenders. You can make an argument that the Bengals have, and it's a good argument. They've won 8 of their last 10. They just beat the Chiefs yet again. Maybe they are the hoodoo that Patrick Mahomes cannot sort out. But, Laz, other than that, the NFL middle class is disappearing.
It is. This is what we talked about through this unique season of parity that, all we're going to hear about is that no one's really stuck their head above the pack. You know, we had some early teams. Early on, we're talking the Bills, the Kansas City Chiefs on the AFC side of things. And then certainly when it came to the NFC, the Eagles had run out with their unbeaten start to the record and unbeaten start to the season. And you mentioned there that, you know, someone's got to win a division like the NFC South. A dear friend of mine, Milan, likes to say when we're talking about fantasy football, somebody's got to catch passes in New England, when each year you're wondering which receiver you might invest in. And that does feel like that scenario in certain divisions throughout. I mean, you look at a spot like the AFC South, and it's similar feelings where you've got teams like the Colts that have not been able to build on previous year's success. The Titans that play tough football, but we know there's a ceiling there, and that ceiling almost seems to be lowering rather than being a high floor team that you figure, can we throw them in that mix? But there are teams that we wondered especially when we did our Super Bowl champion draft a couple of weeks ago. We're kind of after that top kind of 4 picks. Really, it was like, okay, we're banking on teams being able to burst through who can really jump forth, and teams like the Giants are sliding back. A team like the Washington Commanders had found a different type of moxie with a new man at quarterback there, but they get stuck in this, awful punting for tie setup yesterday against their division rivals, which left so much to be desired, especially from a coaching staff like Brian Daboll and his men that you thought would hopefully come up with a more creative scenario down there. Who knows what happened to the ghost of Riverboat Ron. Certainly doesn't feel any Riverboat energy there in Washington, but yes, that middle class is disappearing. It's falling away. And I think I've mentioned a couple of teams already, but one of the ones off the top that really jumped out to me was the Tennessee Titans. We saw what happened when a really strong team, a defense that is getting, is actually adding bodies and getting talent back in the Philadelphia Eagles, what they're able to do up front and take away a running game, take away Derrick Henry, limit to him to 2.7 yards a carry. Yes, they suffer some injuries in that game as well. Their wide receiver core is not overly talented to start with, and then they start to lose some bodies. It's not going to lead to success there, but ultimately, we're starting to see that the aggression that courses through as you said, the cream that's rising to the top, the aggression that courses through franchises like the Philadelphia Eagles, the Kansas City Chiefs, I know they just went down, the Cincinnati Bengals, in terms of what they've accumulated on offense. We've got the tour to Odell Beckham Jr. that is going on right now. He's visited the New York Giants, he's visited the Buffalo Bills, and he's currently, if not right now going through the physical, has just finished his physical at the Star in North Texas, in Dallas. That seems to be, we can really start to see that separation and wondering, who's going to fill out the rest of this playoff picture? We have statements from the Eagles. We have statement wins from the Dallas Cowboys. The Bengals have risen, and we know the caliber of the Bills and the Chiefs. But teams like the Titans, for me, they're so emblematic of the absence of that skyrocket team to come up from this chunky middle class.
Well, as you talk about Derrick Henry limited to 2.7 yards per carry, that has been the case for him for the past calendar month. He's gone 4 games without finding triple digits, whereas prior to that, you could not pencil but pen him in for 1 something, or if he's playing the Texans, you can start that rushing total with a 2. 2.8 yards per carry over those 4 games. But what's alarming for me is that in that time, he has 1.7 yards after contact per carry, whereas prior to it, it was 3 yards after contact per carry. You're talking a pretty significant difference in his ability to make one man miss or push the pile. And it just, to me, shows a matter of fatigue and over-reliance on a thin receiving core that once Treylon Burks is finally showing a measure of productivity, he goes down injured. The man with whom they drafted, or who they drafted once they traded away A.J. Brown. And defensively for the Titans, the week after the Eagles go for 350 yards on the ground, the Titans give up 350 passing yards plus to that team. Titans are emblematic of it, but as for me are the Chargers. We can list a half dozen teams. Both New York teams, I think, fall into this. The Patriots, golly, after that Marcus Jones TD, and you're thinking, hey, this amorphous play calling concept, maybe it's working because we have a defensive back scoring touchdowns. They had 3 points after that, and that game was never in doubt. It felt like Buffalo was in complete control once we got into the second quarter. New England was never going to be able to consistently threaten offensively. But for me, the team most emblematic of it is the LA Chargers. In the year that it seemed like everybody in the AFC West took a step closer to the Chiefs. And the Chiefs, we thought, with the loss of Tyreek Hill, yeah, they had some good pieces around it, but perhaps they would have regressed. They have stayed right on course, have the Chiefs, that despite their loss yesterday. But the rest of those teams, the Raiders, a lot of holes in their game. The Broncos, my goodness, the most anemic offense we've seen in the NFL in 20 years. Your Cowboys have more touchdowns offensively in the last 3 weeks than Denver has all season. That's not hyperbole. But by process of elimination, we thought perhaps the Chargers and Justin Herbert and all the arm talent he has, and yeah, they've had some injuries out wide, but Austin Eckler's been terrifically productive. You just start going through their fixtures over the last 2 months. And at some point, man, you got to say, like, hey, they have to string something together, or they're going to be one of those also-rans that, yeah, by rules, 7 teams have to make the playoffs in the AFC, and one of them is going to be a sacrificial lamb in Buffalo or Kansas City, whoever falls there, or Miami if it ends up that way. They only beat the Broncos by 3. They lose by 2 touchdowns to the Seahawks. They go to Atlanta, fortunate to win that game. It took a defensive lineman on a fumble return, fumbling to nobody for them to get the game-winning field goal there. They lose by a touchdown in San Francisco. They only beat a very weak Cardinals team by a point on the road, and the toaster has been very accommodating to guests. And then they lose by a touchdown to the Raiders in a game that never really felt that close. It felt like every time I tuned in, the Raiders were ahead by 2 touchdowns, and Devontae Adams was catching passes at will, as is wont to happen. But that is that middle class. And of those, I think the Bengals have been the exception, the team that after their Super Bowl 0-2 start, oh my gosh, Super Bowl hangover, well, they've been able to, after losing some early footing, gain some momentum. A lot of these other teams, it seems like the trajectory is the other way around. It's the roller coaster at the amusement park. The quick rise and the quicker fall right away.
I think that's that the Bengals are no longer part of the middle class, and this was not just a segment designed so I can say bourgeoisie again. This was an idea that came from your end. I just happened to relish that opportunity, but they are no longer part of the middle class. They've ascended to that upper tier. You look at what they've done against the best of the best. You look at the different way they challenged the Chiefs this time. This wasn't drop 8 defenders that we saw last time. These guys went toe-to-toe with all the stakes on the line, with all the hype on the line, and all the pressure there. This was a clever game plan. They challenged in different ways. They sent heat at different times. They have ascended. So they're not part. They are the team that's separated, and as others are falling away, a team – not just to pick on the AFC side of things, but you're absolutely spot on with the Chargers. And I think I need to just, as you get into your 30s, certain things change in your life, and you need to put restrictions, and you need to put limitations, and understand what you need to stay away from, what's good for you, what's healthy. And me sending explosive wide receivers to the Chargers in trade deadline fever dreams, it needs to stop, Phil. I need to take better care of myself there, because it's quite frankly, it's not healthy for me to keep doing this, because they're not one of these teams, as much as we beg, that seemingly during the season can recognize what's wrong and course correct. And from an offensive standpoint there with the Chargers, I think they need to be bound for a full philosophical shake up there, because this is just not an efficient, effective, and smart use of the talent they have on offense, and most notably with their quarterback. The Patriots are another one for me. We're talking about ceilings here. We're talking about a team that has struggled to lift the identity, presence, and in some ways commitment to who they've got at quarterback, seemingly continually outclassed by opposition in that tier above, and not a team that can. We look at I guess part of what we're talking about here is what do you add? What do you recognize about your game that you're going to focus on, that you can expand on, and that you can add as we go on? The Buffalo Bills, and yes, they're obviously a tier above, but we're seeing this running game that we have so often. So we sat here on this show, not just this season, but last season, asked when are they going to be able to develop that counterpunch to what you can obviously do with Josh Allen, and they are. And the rise of rookie and James Cook, they're adding to that explosion and that efficiency out of the backfield. You mentioned the Raiders, who have been so frustrating this season, but there was such a direct contrast with a team like the Chargers in how the Raiders seem to have recognized, you know what? It's just time to dial up Devontae Adams over and over and over and over and over again. And I just feel like from a team like the New England Patriots, contrast against some of those outfits is that, yes, we know that the wide receiver core remains just, mired in mediocrity at best, but unable to sustain any kind of dominant tone-setting identity on offense, or even not even dominant, just continually successful. And whether you fall back towards exactly what's going on from offensive play calling, who does this offense belong to, and the incredibly non-committal comments and messaging we're getting out from New England, with Bill Belichick asked about, is it time to shake up kind of the infrastructure of what's going on offense there, and really kind of a bit of a blasé. It's at this point in the season, it's tough to do something like that, anything radical kind of response. They're another team that I know Patriots fans and New England sports fans who are so used to success, and there's plenty of other success going in the major sports over in the US in that area. This is another, blasé feels like the word, just a middling, identityless roster and season that is such a contrast from what we've seen for the previous couple of decades there.
And it seems, you mentioned the Patriots, it seems that's indicative that we are going to see in the AFC East over the final weeks this separation between the top half, the Dolphins and the Bills, and the bottom half, the Jets and the Patriots. The Jets had opportunity time and again away to the Vikings, a team that you and I have both said openly we don't trust, but they are 9-0 in one-score games, and at some point you have an indelible belief that in a close game, first-year coach Kirk Cousins, however they're going to do it, by hook or by crook, Justin Jefferson, they're going to find a way to win the game. Mike White, fine, 369 yards, no touchdowns, most ever by a Jets quarterback without a touchdown, but still that team 1 for 6 in the red zone. And getting into the end zone, and that's just it seems that they're just missing that piece in New York. They're just missing that piece in New England, though it seems to be under center. I know we'll talk more about some of these teams, but Law's a team that, for me, would not be in this conversation if not for perhaps depending on what happens with Lamar Jackson and how long he's out, either the most significant or the second most significant quarterback injury news on the weekend. The Miami Dolphins falling in San Francisco. The final score is not reflective of the game. The 49ers almost doubling up the Dolphins 33-17. But credit to the 49ers, especially since Jimmy Garoppolo goes down early in that game, called an ankle injury, turns out to be a broken foot. And in comes QB3. The 49ers were as fortunate as anybody. And you and I have talked about it on this show. Having to replace a starting quarterback with injury, you cannot have a better scenario than the guy who has been the starter for the last half decade, has taken this team, has played for this team in a Super Bowl. I think taking the team to a Super Bowl might be overstating it, but he has been on a deep playoff run with this team. They just give the reins back to Jimmy Garoppolo. Kyle Shanahan's record with Garoppolo under center versus other quarterbacks, it is a significant uptick with Jimmy G. He's out. Now that luxury completely goes away because the drop-off from QB2 to QB3, a guy who was in sweats and a T-shirt in Week 1, Mr. Irrelevant, the final pick of the 2022 NFL Draft, Brock Purdy from Iowa State. Not only was he the first Mr. Irrelevant, suddenly now very relevant, Mr. Relevant to throw a touchdown pass in the NFL, according to Andrew Siciliano and NFL Research, he's the first Mr. Irrelevant to attempt a forward pass in the NFL. We've seen undrafted quarterbacks, but I will say the fact that he was drafted by San Francisco in the final slot showed that they did prioritize him and they didn't want him to become an undrafted free agent, meet with everybody. Sure, but they plug him in. gets the job done. But man, one of those teams that was a very popular pick outside of the big 2.5 in the NFC, Eagles, Vikings, Cowboys. Outside of those, the 49ers were everybody's pick as, oh man, this is a team you need to watch. We saw what they did to Dallas in the playoffs last year, making it all the way to the NFC Championship game. Now, massive question marks, Laws, and despite the win, now I think they fall into the category of disappearing middle class.
They certainly do. They are, you mentioned right before we got deeply into the 49ers there, how the Ravens respond. They're another team that even before Lamar Jackson went down with what is sounding like a week-to-week knee injury, not season-ending is the words we're hearing early out of Ravens camp. They were a team that were just so frustrated with it. But even before the Rashad Bateman injury, Lamar Jackson's play was operating at a certain level, but the spacing, the strategy, the week-to-week execution of the wider offense was so far beneath that. And I don't think this is also not one of the most dominant Ravens defense. They have their spot talent, but it's not one of the most dominant Ravens defenses we've seen in recent years, despite the fact that they held the Denver Broncos to a mediocre total, but that's not necessarily an indicator of an elite unit. Yeah, but they were a team that always was already sitting there, and now, obviously with a cloud surrounding what's going on at quarterback in Baltimore, they reside there. And for the 49ers, yeah, they seemed like, if we're talking about the Bengals on the AFC side of things, bursting out of the middle class and potentially grabbing hold of not just a wild card spot, but a division. We'll see how that plays out. The 49ers felt very similar in terms of their undeniable strength in the defensive front. The work you're going to get out of the linebacking core. Fred Warner is an absolute star, and you saw the role he played yesterday against an explosive Miami Dolphins team that loves to operate in his part of the field and his area of coverage and how disruptive he could be there. They are still a team that you don't want to be punched. You don't want to face in the playoffs, because when they punch you in the mouth, it can be a knockout blow. As you said, go ask the Dallas Cowboys about that with the likes of Nick Bosa up front. The well-coached nature, not just everyone talks about coaching in San Francisco, and we think we're talking about Kyle Shanahan, but what D'Amico Ryans has done, future head coach D'Amico Ryans has done with that unit. So they're a team that, we felt like they're going to be ones to burst forth and put themselves squarely in the elite, take hold of the NFC West. The Seattle Seahawks in a tight race there. We won't talk about the other two teams in that division, because, quite frankly, we've spent enough airtime on those disappointing units so far in the 2022 campaign.
But Monday Night Football next week, so we'll bring it back. And the other one's in Monday Night Football the week after that, so they'll have their area.
But it seems like we've got a natural segue here to move on from what's happened to the NFL middle class to cue the music, cue the Ghostbusters track. Who are you going to call, Phil? Who are you going to call, Phil, if you are in need of a QB savior, and the team most squarely in this picture would be the San Francisco 49ers, because this is a Super Bowl ready roster. Talked about the defensive front and exactly what they can do. Then you look at offensively, just the ridiculous star talent they have there. Trent Williams, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk. You sleep on the likes of big body Juwan Jennings that will give you big time third down conversions with the target he presents. And this is a Super Bowl ready roster. They in terms of matchup, they can certainly challenge any team in the NFC and arguably the NFL. But with Brock Purdy at quarterback, that reality we have to accept disappears. I'm not trying to write some overly grand, revisionist history about the career of one Jimmy Garoppolo, but we know what his ceiling is, and he can get you to the big dance. And in some ways, he was playing better than he did during that season when they made it to the Super Bowl. We know that reality existed with this type of talent around him. Ridiculous to think that Brock Purdy could do the same with that same level of expectation. So the question I'm going to throw out there, and I know we've got comments coming in, and we'll get to those right after this segment. And I appreciate this coming in. It's firing your comment.
He's the only one who can monitor the chat just with the technology. And he has to come in with the substitute teacher energy every week. God bless him.
Look, we're all given certain roles and opportunities in this world, Phil, and I relish mine. But the question remains, and send in your answers. Who would you call from recently retired, current free agent, or practice squad, quarterbacks that are available? I'm not sure they really fit the bill of taking this roster to the next level. Who would you call resources at your disposal, knowing that you can't go back and, well, one, you can't trade for any asset because the trade deadline is passed, and two, let's not go pulling 53-year-old quarterbacks out of significant retirement.
Well, first, I do want to briefly address Brock Purdy and anybody who says, "Hey, he beat the Dolphins. Give him a shot," and he may well get the shot. But let's be very clear: he did not beat the Dolphins. That was game management in its finest form. He did the job, but 5.7 yards per attempt against the team that had no schematic need to prepare for Brock Purdy. And there's a viral clip going around of Mike McDaniel, Dolphins head coach, saying, "I bleeped up" to his team and taking ownership of a bad play call with Tua, and I think Jalen Waddle was there as well, and everybody saying, "Oh, the ownership of the coach is taking. Man, this is why guys love him." Yes and amen to that. But I think the Dolphins are also going to say, when they look at this tape, the coaching staff on the defensive side, we bleeped up because they had a lot of success against Purdy when they were blitzing, and for some reason on key downs they would bring a standard pass rush, and Purdy's yards per attempt went from 4.5 against the blitz to 6.2 when he had a four-man rush. He had 10 of his 13 first downs when going up against a four-man rush. His checkdowns to Christian McCaffrey were easy money. 6 catches on 7 targets for 71 yards and a touchdown against a four-man rush. What an outlet to have. While we're on the topic of a recent Carolina Panther, with Baker Mayfield being released today, that is the immediate fantasy segue. He's on waivers. If he clears waivers, people are going to call him. I don't think the risk reward is worth it for a team that has proven with proper game management they can make a deep January run. Too much drama there, too much baggage. I mean, I don't know if McCaffrey would be keen on that one. So, Laz, I'm not going to go outside the box. I know you are probably going to go outside the box, and I encourage that. I applaud it. It's why we're such good friends. I'm not going to go outside the box. I am going to go north of the border to British Columbia. The BC Lions, Nathan Rourke, is meeting this week with the Raiders for a backup audition. The Broncos, who have no semblance of a plan under center for the next half decade, they need something to come, a rabbit to pop out of a hat. Rourke just led the BC Lions to the Western Final in the CFL. They lost to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. He had a terrific season. He won Most Outstanding Canadian, which is one of my favorite trophy names in all of football. He played his college ball at the University of Ohio. He has shown terrific form. I think the 49ers vault to the top of the list for him to audition for a backup role in the future, because it seems as though Jimmy Garoppolo is gone for the year. I think the two smartest teams, I would love to see him in a Broncos shirt just to see what any other quarterback can do. But he'll meet with the Raiders, meet with the Broncos. I think he should well meet with the Rams because, man, with Matt Stafford on IR, they don't have their pick. So what does it matter if they tank and lose and get a top 3 pick? It's going to Detroit anyway. I think San Francisco should give him a call, and not that he can take the reins of an offense, but man, if San Francisco can survive this with Brock Purdy and Nathan Rourke shows a higher ceiling, man, maybe at that point in January you get in a little bit of a pickle, and Brock Purdy is looking like a 7th-round pick. Throw in the kid from British Columbia who's proven he can win at the professional level. You're not going to get the forward motion that you get in the CFL. We're not going to be able to miss an extra point and have it count as a rouge and you get a point for that. It's going to be, a low ceiling, all things considered, but perhaps, in my opinion, a higher ceiling than that which Brock Purdy presents. Nathan,
I love that you went north of the border. I love that the CFL came to you.
It's not that long of a flight. He's already in Vegas and Denver. Just hop over to San Fran.
That's one of the avenues that I wanted to wander down, looking for something here, because I'm not going to go down, these Hall of Fame great quarterbacks that we could stick behind, say it was an all-world offensive line and ask Kurt Warner to throw it around a bit. I'm not going that far back. And I'm not trying to make light of this either, plenty of talk in the off-season recently gone by about players retiring, spending time with family, et cetera, and that leads me to someone who spent a bunch of time out on the West Coast, not in the NFC, in the AFC, and someone who, from all reports, there was interest in one more ride in his last stop, before that was taken away. And a quarterback that has not spent time in the Shanahan system, but if you're asking for smarts, defensive recognition, having seen every possible defensive scheme and front and look and rotation that the NFL could throw at him, and some poise and toughness in the postseason. If I am Kyle Shanahan, I am giving a call to one Philip. Yes, I have 9 kids at home, Rivers. And I'm seeing look, we know that arm was not strong by the end of his career, but he was still playing football at a decent level due to his smarts and his decision making. This is, again, I went and looked through like Shanahan tree quarterbacks and who's going to play that. We're not calling RG3 up. I'm sure Washington football fans still have nightmares about the hype that was built around John Beck's quick release. These are not the names we're going to, but Phil Rivers, smart enough to come into a system, learn the rules, learn the verbiage, and also know that look what's surrounding me. This is not, yes, Brandon Ayuk can hit you downfield if given the opportunity, but the yak opportunity, all the weapons we discussed before, McCaffrey,
George Kittle,
yep. Yeah. We just need that as a sound drop. just hit the sound drop, roll the names. But what they have at their disposal, you're not asking him to chuck 50-yard bombs downfield. We need accurate, quick decision-making, placement to let these guys get to work. And that was, as all the think pieces that have come out over the past couple of years, particularly the past 6 months around the Indianapolis Colts, past few months really, it has been mentioned that there was desire for Phil Rivers, and there was desire even within the building to have him re-up and come back for one last ride in Indianapolis. That obviously didn't play out. They made a move. They have made several moves at quarterback since then. But Phil Rivers, to me, also brings some good vibes energy. This is someone that people will get around. The Socceroos camp that has just come to an end, the campaign in Qatar at the World Cup, talked about Martin Boyle being the minister for good vibes. This is a common theme in Australian sport. You could certainly see that being added to the portfolio of starting quarterback and minister for good vibes, someone that a team that is loaded with star talent and star expectations and justifiably Super Bowl expectations can look at someone like Phil Rivers with all the personality, and I mentioned the good vibes, but the gravitas and respect that he has with all that he achieved in the league. And also, you have to imagine, yes, as much as it must be fulfilling and draining at home with 9 kids to deal with, but the burning ember that would still flicker for him about unfulfilled postseason success. This is a unique opportunity. You're going to guess whatever's left in his arm is pretty well rested. And you can't question his toughness. We're talking about a guy that played deep in the playoffs with a torn ACL. I would love to see them give him a call and say, look, we have a unique roster here. We have a unique opportunity. We know we can go toe-to-toe with anybody. We need a game manager plus with a little extra spice and seasoning. And for me, that would be one Philip Rivers.
And Laz, just for those of us in that small subsect of NFL Twitter who would get so excited when Rivers would come on the field inside the 2-minute warning, down 4 to 6 points with no timeouts, throw to the boundary, Philip Rivers purgatory, which once Dan Le Batard pointed that out, it seemed like it was a weekly occurrence where he was getting the ball for the Chargers usually. I mean, that was the lion's share of his career, playing in Southern California. Now we're calling on him to go to Northern California. One last Philip Rivers purgatory for the road in January. In Dallas, it's 27-22 for some reason, which was the Vikings-Jets final score. Minute 5 left. Phil's got to go 70 yards out of timeouts. Can't really throw it deep. What are we going to do? I'm for it. I mean, I still think it is going to ultimately be Brock Purdy, but yours is more fun than, my friendly Canadian Nathan Rourke.
We had a few other nominations sent in. Brad Bolt, friend of the show, saying hello. Does Cam have anything left? Cap, maybe. For me, no. Cam Newton, from what we saw recently, I don't think that's a fit with what they're trying to achieve, although all these former connections to former Panthers quarterbacks and Christian McCaffrey flowing in. As for Colin Kaepernick, we know the absolutely loaded, important, and multi-tier discussion that surrounds Colin Kaepernick. If you're talking from a pure football standpoint, I would wonder, considering the running game and the running element that is prized up in Baltimore, if this was a long-term injury to Lamar Jackson from a pure football standpoint, is that more of a fit? Could that be something that was easier, despite his history in the Bay? Is that something that is a more tangible and more obvious schematic fit? Some of the other ones that we got sent in as I threw out the request last night, and I'm just pulling up some of the tweets here now. What we were looking at, well, Cooper Rush was suggested by let's go Steve, because his Twitter handle is a little long, and I don't want to mispronounce anything there. But Steve wanted Cooper Rush. Obviously can't happen due to the trade deadline passing. John Roberts, Ryan Fitzpatrick. The beard looks lush. How fit he is, who knows? But San Francisco, could we make it happen? Hey, look, it's worth a discussion.
Have the Harvard connection, so at least he and somebody in the backfield.
Little. None of the main weapons that we mentioned, but hey, the juice, Carl Juszczyk, makes sense there. And Ryan Fitzpatrick, the Fitz magic generally lasts about a month, 5 weeks. You're not asking for that much longer from Fitz. Get him in, give him a week or two to acclimate. Then we're in the final few weeks of the regular season, and hey, let's get in the postseason, see if we can catch lightning in a bottle. And nothing is quite like
any extremely hostile environments in the playoffs in terms of weather, right? You're playing indoors in Dallas, indoors in Minnesota. Philly can get a little brisk in January, but we're not saying you're going to be playing at Lambeau Field, certainly. Like, Ryan, here's what we need, man. A home game, probably against a middling wild card team. And then let's see what you got against the Vikings on the road. And if you win that, maybe you play the Cowboys or the Eagles.
And look, for someone like Ryan Fitzpatrick, if you're only asking him to throw the ball 20 times a game, you're increasing the chance that you're decreasing the chance that he's going to, get into one of his when Fitzmagic turns to Fitztragic too quickly and the heat check ends. You keep it. Exactly. It's that 35 to 50 pass attempts range. Those final 15 where we start to get a little dicey. So look, I think, look, you're right. It could very much be Dirty Purdy we see for some time to come. But ideally, you have to think somewhere within the bowels of the Bay Area, somewhere within 49ers HQ, they're looking at their storied history, their Super Bowls, their Lombardis, the names, and go, we really have a chance with this roster to add something else, to just add one more. And I do want to throw out there, because you mentioned Baker Mayfield off the top, and there was a tweet, and I'm pulling up the stat right now. There was a tweet shared by ESPN's own Nick Wagner, NFL Nation reporter out in the Bay Area. Obviously, the Baker Mayfield conversation was bubbling away. Newly released quarterback Baker Mayfield has an 18.2 total QBR this season. That ranks 520th out of 521 qualified QB seasons since the stat started being tracked in 2006. Who was the other name? Who was number 521 out of 521? That would be the golden arm of one Jimmy Clausen, a fellow Panthers quarterback.
What is with the Panthers, man?
I don't. I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss, as I'm sure many of their fans are.
Oh. All right, Laz.
So,
you got your belt handy?
I do have my belt handy. It's ready to go.
Ding, ding, ding. All right, let's do it. Let's go to the tag team champions of the world of the week. And Laz, for this one, we are going to the team that is atop the ladder match in all of the NFL. Won the Philadelphia Eagles, who remain the class of the league in terms of record. Man, did they make a statement in Tennessee, a 35-10 win. And Laz, we knew this team could move the ball on the ground. Jalen Hurts has been terrific in the pocket time and time again this season. That A.J. Brown trade in the offseason might prove the executive move of the year. The Eagles go from last week, week 12, 350 rush yards, which, I mean, in this modern NFL is a staggering total. And then the immediate following week, they have 350 through the air. You might ask, that seems abnormal. And you would be right, NFL Brekkie Show presented by Forward Viewer. It is abnormal. Stats have been kept in the NFL for yards since 1933. This is just the third time a team has had 350 on the ground and 350 in the air in any order in consecutive weeks. The 1987 Los Angeles Raiders and the 1959 shouts to Y.A. Tittle New York Football Giants. Those are the two. The 2022 Philadelphia Eagles are the third. So our tag team champions of the world, of the week, the two receivers who made that possible. A.J. Brown, 8 catches, 119 yards, 2 scores on 10 targets. 8 catches on 10 targets. And his running mate, the Heisman Trophy winner, Devontae Smith, 5 catches on 8 targets for 102 and a touchdown. Grand total was 13 catches, 121 yards, 3 touchdowns on 18 targets. Good luck.
This was dominant, physical, explosive, and detailed from what we saw from those receivers. And credit to Jalen Hurts as well. This might have been his finest performance as a passer. We know what he's done with his legs. We know what he's done challenging teams in situational football. But what he did with his leg, what he did with his right arm, the composure, the presence, the different layers of the field he was hitting, deserves all the credit. But when we touch on these receivers, the detail from Devontae Smith at times, some sideline receptions that he had, where this isn't the 40-yard gains or the touchdowns we're talking about, but just the finer things that he does, where the ball is a yard over the outside of the boundary there, and the timing, it's not an accident, the way he works his footwork, the way he works his feet to keep them in bounds, just keep those, for such a talented team, when they're doing, it's not just potential, physical talent. When you add in the mastery and the craftsmanship to the position that they do, it takes it to another level. And as for A.J. Brown, one of his touchdowns, late hands, incredibly tight coverage, no separation whatsoever, and hauls it in. The wide open touchdown that he had down the left sideline, I remember years ago, there was a touchdown that Julio Jones scored where he simply trampled someone and then showed ridiculous speed with ball in hand. And it brought memories back to the late great, and I mean great, as great as they come, Jonah Lomu, All Blacks legend, rugby, essentially a rugby god. And that overwhelming physical presence, not just to move with the ball in hand, but what you do when someone gets in your way. And Julio drew that to mind. This was more Ma'a Nonu, another fine All Blacks legend there, a bulldozing ball carrier. What he did to poor Christian Fulton, who's a talented young corner for the Tennessee Titans, worked a move on him. Contact came. Fulton was actually flagged for illegal contact. A.J. Brown just bodied him. He just steamrolled straight over him. You want to know why he was 30 yards wide open, surrounded by nothing. But wild thoughts about what he might have for dinner that night. It's because Christian Fulton was lying on the ground 30 yards behind him. This was just an absolute steamrolling from that wide receiver position in tandem with their quarterback, who is playing the best football we have seen. So very, very deserving belt owners for the week, coming out from the mighty Philadelphia Eagles, and that tandem that, in the absence of someone like Dallas Goedert, has taken their explosive and detailed nature to a whole new level. Over 200 yards, 3 touchdowns combined from the two of them on a banner day for the Eagles against a very talented defense.
I mean, the artwork makes itself. I know you compared Jonah Lomu to Julio Jones, but the number 11 for the All Blacks, number 11 for the Philadelphia Eagles, and A.J. Brown, it almost writes itself. And I want to add to what you're saying about A.J. Brown being open. When he was open, and open is defined in the NFL by at least 3 yards of separation, targeted 4 times, 4 catches, 68 yards, and the aforementioned touchdown. He averaged 4.1 yards of separation for target. So it's physical dominance, it's separation speed, it's route running, it's all of those things to make the throws for Jalen Hurts easy. And that is the visible distinction is the vertical threat posed by the Philadelphia wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2, the tag team champions of the world of the week. Last year, on throws of at least 15 air yards, so 15 yards beyond the line of scrimmage, Jalen Hurts averaged 3.2 yards per attempt. So just digest those numbers. When he's throwing 15, he's averaging 1/5 of that, at least. It's probably less because many of those throws are 20 or 25 yards downfield. 9 touchdowns to 7 picks. A few arm punts in there, as they say. This year, 15-plus air yards. Jalen Hurts is averaging 17.2 yards per attempt. He has 11 touchdowns to 1 interception. That does so many things beyond the obvious vertical threat and what long catches can do just in terms of immediate productivity. Now as a safety, I really have to respect the deep ball. I can't crash down on a very adept run game. And whether it's an RPO or a PRO that the Eagles are running, it's an exponential snowball benefit that the vertical threat that A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, like 2 pedals on a bike, present. Do all that for the offense, which is how they can face a not poor, not mediocre, a solid Tennessee Titans team and outlast them 35-10. That's why standing atop the ladder in the NFL, atop the ladder match, we'll just call it a ladder match, for our tag team championship of the World of the Week, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith.
Undeniable is the word that comes to mind. And yeah, you mentioned there a talented Tennessee Titans defense that they were up against, and one that wants to beat you up. One, we've talked about their approach to players like Travis Kelce, where they want to get physical with you off the line with big defensive backs, get in your face and disrupt right off the top. Well, they certainly met their match in the Philadelphia Eagles and the presence they bring out wide. Now, while we're on highly positive situations, we have some more honors to hand out, Phil, for Week 13, and a pair of receivers, young receivers, one in his rookie season and another in his sophomore season, that are truly challenging the quota at the top of the star true breakouts and matchup weapons week in, week out at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, Laz, you and I each have I don't want to say a nominee, an honoree for our Next Gen, brought to you by the Next Gen Ford Everest. Conquer every day with the Next Gen Ford Everest. This is an award that is, if not a rookie, a newer player in the NFL, somebody who's burst onto the scene, part of the next generation. And in a draft that was very deep at the wide receiver position, somebody who has absolutely emerged in the last 2 weeks. And if anybody had a vote in the city that never sleeps as to who would be starting under center heretofore, Garrett Wilson would stuff the ballot box for Mike White. I keep wanting to call him White Mike because I heard one pundit call him that tongue-in-cheek. Mike White. Garrett Wilson, 8 catches, 162 yards in a competitive loss for the Jets in Minnesota. The most receiving yards by a Jet since 2014. But looking at the split since Mike White took over, in the last 2 weeks, Garrett Wilson is number 1 in the NFL for most receiving yards. With Zach Wilson at quarterback, he averaged 3.5 receptions per game. That's gone up to 6.5 with Mike White. Yards per reception go up from 12.3 to 19.8. That's a 75% increase on yards per reception. He's nearly doubling his receptions per game. And Laws's target percentage isn't that disparate. It's 21% versus 29%. It's just Mike White is just so good about going through his progressions. We talked about this last week. But the guy who is finally emerging from that is Garrett Wilson. No relation to Zach Wilson. He's going to keep that as distant as he can get it. This guy has truly emerged as, if he had done this since week 2 or week 3, he'd be a rookie of the year contender, if not favorite. In the last 2 weeks, he's looked like a top 10 or top 15 receiver in the NFL, did Garrett Wilson, looking like the reason the Jets took him at 10 overall or wherever they took him in the draft. He is my next gen star because it seems as though, even in the loss, and we had Jeremy Fowler come on SportsCenter NFL Blitz and talk to this very point, it seems as though the audition is going quite well for Mike White to be the quarterback, at least for the rest of the season. And I'm buying stock in Garrett Wilson, what he's going to do week to week with that QB under center, what he can do, again, going through the progressions, throwing in rhythm, and again, not targeting him at necessarily a significantly higher rate, but getting so much more efficiency per target. This isn't the last time we've seen Garrett Wilson have triple-digit receiving yards as we get into a time of the year when it's actually, frankly, more difficult to throw the ball.
The name that comes the Horesh stable this week for the next gen, the Ford Everest honors for this week, there's some comparisons between Garrett Wilson and Amon-Ra St. Brown in terms of the undeniable chemistry and way that they elevate the quarterbacks. So often we talk about quarterbacks elevating talent around them. You talk about how Garrett Wilson has worked with Mike White and the instant connection and how he's helped in that audition for Mike White. Jared Goff is a completely different quarterback when he has Amon-Ra St. Brown out there. He's whether you're talking about deep stats like EPA per play, where you're looking at just your eye test, but you're looking at a simple stat like 40 burgers being laid on the Jaguars when Amon-Ra St. Brown is healthy and out there.
That's that.
Exactly. And Amon-Ra St. Brown he's not an inconvenient superstar, but he is an undeniable superstar in that you can tell from his attitude, the way he talks, the way he reels off the list of names of every single wide receiver that was drafted ahead of him in the 2021 draft class. There is a relentlessness, there is an undeniability to the ceiling and the heights of which this young Lions wide receiver wants to scale over his past 4 outings. We're talking over 400 total yards. He's got 3 touchdowns the last 2 weeks, 2 touchdowns this week, 114 yards receiving in a stellar performance from the Lions. And whilst we might be talking, it would take something close to miraculous for him to get hot enough to streak in to make a wild card spot. We were talking about where's the middle class gone in the NFL this season earlier in the show. The Lions are one of these teams that looks like they could soar up into the middle class, soar right through it and climb to the top of the pile there. Amon-Ra St. Brown
clinched the division on the weekend is that the Lions
absolutely. He is detailed. He is tough. He is in a division in the NFC North where we've seen some massive names at the other franchise. We've seen massive names at the likes of Calvin Johnson, Megatron at the Detroit Lions. He's built differently to that, but he shows that every layer of the field, situational football, red zone football, he is a weapon. He is a problem. And hearing from him the makeup, the character, a unique journey that he and his brothers, including Equanimeous St. Brown, have come through, and the family that they come from, the multiple languages that they learn. He is a unique weapon built for this era of the NFL, built for fantastic situational matchups. The way they are deploying him is fantastic in Detroit, and I think we can only expect more and more. Talking about next gen, talking about the new names coming into the fold, Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, fantastic talents, and exciting to see as they trend upwards towards the end of the season and how their narratives are going to carry on to 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, as you alluded, they speak 3 languages. When they committed to university, Amon-Ra to USC, Equanimeous to Notre Dame, Osiris did the same thing, their third brother. They committed in Latin and French before they announced their commitment in English. Thankfully, I could hear Notre Dame for Equanimeous, and so broke the news he's committing to Notre Dame.
See, people don't respect the cultured nature that you bring, Phil. You know, they're really, you're a worldly man.
Also,
you've lived all over.
He could have been thinking Notre Dame and then committing to Oregon in French, and I have no idea. But yeah, I mean, the brilliant family, and his dad was a Mr. Olympia level bodybuilder. The physical gifts are there, and I can add a 4th language. Those boys are fluent in football. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, the culture of a locker room, the toughness, the gifts, piecing it all together, super high IQ. I mean, you talk to these guys, and they all are all very charitable with their time. We had one of our touching moments on the blitz where Amon-Ra saw a kid on the sidelines, went up, took a photo with him, found out the kid was battling cancer, sent him a jersey and gloves and cleats and everything from the game, tracked him down over social media, goes down to the character. So he's somebody who is easy to celebrate. And that is part of the next generation of superstar. We're seeing that a lot of Josh Allen's very charitable at this time post-game. Lamar Jackson is the same. And we could go on and on. But it is good to see guys who are solid people off the field and far more than solid on it. And Amon-Ra St. Brown is at the top of that list.
Before we move on to our final segment of the show, before we get to propaganda, we do have a few questions and a few comments, and I thought we could throw them around. We're at the 49-minute mark. We'll try and get out. We're not going to spend too much longer. First, Megan, just let's go Seattle.
Let's go Seattle.
12th, really up and about Seattle.
12th man. Hey, they keep getting results. The NFC West, it's bad news. It's a zero-sum game. Bad news for San Francisco is good news for Seattle. And we keep talking about San Francisco home game. Let's not write off the Seahawks just yet because they're playing with house money.
And, Kenneth Walker suffers an injury, and we'll see the significance of that, how long he's out for, but it pales in comparison to the injury that you mentioned the 49ers are dealing with within the division. And contrasting again what we're seeing from Geno Smith, who refuses to accept anyone that suggests that this is just a momentary purple patch and what he's showing, and continues talking about auditions, what he's laid down for the expectations, and hopefully the investment.
Overall picked in the draft. Thank you, Denver.
There you go. Brad Bolt wants to know, lads, Phil's shirt of choice for the day. Let's get into this. Of course.
Talking about late great, my friend John Clayton, rest in power. The famous John Clayton Slayer commercial. This shirt in memory of John Clayton is the shirt of choice today. I'm in Tampa here for the Bucks game. I have the creamsicle Bucks orange. I already wore that once this year. I don't have any Saints gear, so to keep things neutral, and keep things neutral, keep things positive. Everybody loved John Clayton, a gem of a human being. So that is a not subtle tribute to my dear friend.
A beautiful homage and tribute. Not that anybody asked me what I was wearing today, but if you did see the Jets turned up to take on the Minnesota Vikings, rocking Mighty Ducks original jerseys there. One of them was wearing a Banks Hawks jersey as well, mildly controversial, but I respect the throwback there. For that, and on that note is why I've got the Dean Portman Morgan Park special number 21. If you don't remember that was Mighty Ducks 2. Of course, you can watch it on Disney Plus right now, as well as Mighty Ducks Game Changers. Talking about next gens and new additions, fine reboot. Yes, Mighty Ducks 2, you get what would be the Bash brother coming in and arriving in Morgan Park special. Some good 90s headphones on. Some questionable track pants were on offer as well, and singing quite loudly and a bit of air guitar, played with the hockey stick. It certainly was an energy that I related to as a preteen when that movie dropped. And finally, the B League says the fantasy football show wants to know, the Packers are making the playoffs, aren't they? No. Despite some things change, some things stay the same. Aaron Rodgers owning the Green Bay Packers, owning Chicago Bears, okay. But no, I don't think, in my opinion, Phil, this does not point to some grand resurgence, a lucky wild card spot, and one of the all-time FU modes from Aaron Rodgers. But what say you on that front?
Yeah, I mean, if they run the table, they go 9-8. If they run the table, that may get them in. They're on a bye this coming week. I will be freezing my backside off on the sidelines. Negative double-digit Celsius is the forecast for Green Bay 2 weeks from today as they host the Rams. That should be a win, 100%. But then they visit the Dolphins. They host the Vikings. I don't see them stringing together those 4 in a row. And if they don't, they're 8-9. And if they're 8-9, they're not getting the wild card.
There you go. And we just got one final one here from Christopher Morris. When do we see Desmond Ridder, rookie quarterback in Atlanta? I think almost.
The thing is, if the Saints win today, and the spread is 3 points, if the Saints win today, Laz, I believe the Falcons are a half game out of the playoffs.
Yeah, exactly.
If
this had gone full tank mode.
Wins. So it's got to be all in to try and get to whatever 7-10. If the Saints win today, 7-10 would probably do the deed in the NFC South.
So yeah, I think if the Falcons had found themselves at a far different record and were well out of it, yes, it's time to experiment. But coaches tend to,
or if the Bucks were 8-4,
yes,
which isn't the case.
Yeah, but coaches tend to, and this is pretty constant across the NFL, when they have a sniff, when they have a chance for postseason, and we talk about tanking and draft picks and all that, and that is great, but you can't underestimate the impact of winning and overachieving in a locker room, as well as how much constant losing can really do damage to the fabric, the chemistry, the belief within a locker room. As much as it might make sense on paper for draft picks, draft capital, rebuilding, salary cap structures, what you can do this year versus next year, those are the elements that we're not a part of because we're not in locker rooms. Those are the intangibles. But when a team has a sniff, a coach will tend to stay with what's working, stay competitive, and be less open to a radical move like that, especially at that position. All right, Phil.
Said,
yes.
If the Bucks win today, and if the Bucks, string together a couple wins, could be week 17, week 18.
Yep.
See Desmond Ridder out there just to see what we have.
All right. Before we get to week 17, week 18, we've got week 13 to finish off, Phil. And
Prop.
you,
Gander. Having a gander at some props. Well, I was looking at last week. Both of us split our picks. In some ways, we were both fortuitous. I more than you, but it was negligible difference. I created another 0.19 unit of spread. My margin is plus 3.82 over you. We're both positive on the year as a team. We are over 4 units positive still. So I have honors. I'll be quick because we got 5 minutes. Tom Brady to not throw an interception under 0.5 picks at $1.80. This number has drifted down. I think it will continue to drift down. Here's why. He's thrown 2 interceptions all year. 1 since week 1. He threw 1 in week 1 against the Cowboys. He's thrown 1 since. The Saints have forced just 2 interceptions all season. That is last in the NFL. There are 25 players with more interceptions than the Saints have as a team. They're minus 14 turnover differential. No Marshawn Lattimore today. $1.80 for Tom Brady to not throw an interception is my top pick, my best bet, my leading tip of the week.
Yeah, I was looking at interception markets, and the number at $1.68 for Andy Dalton to throw a pick was just a little too low for me, because you do know I love to flirt around those areas. But for me, mine's a double up for the first one. It is a 2-parter with the absences in the Saints secondary, and Marshawn Lattimore will not be lining up today. And unfortunately, we don't get to see that, one of the most intense rivalries between a cornerback and a wide receiver across the NFL, or any oppositional position battles that we see across the NFL. Lattimore and Evans has been must-see TV for quite some time. I'm going Mike Evans over 62.5 yards receiving and to score a touchdown. That's at $3.60. It's all in one. It's a combo bet. That's where I'm leaning. It's not just because I've left Mike Evans on my bench for fantasy this week. That has absolutely nothing to do with it. Come on, Chris Godwin, step up now for us, big fella. But yeah, I see that. I don't think this is as cohesive and healthy a Saints defense as we've seen that has given trouble to the Bucs in recent seasons. What's always been such a fascinating matchup. You almost throw out the win-loss records when these two get together to dance. So I'm going with Mike Evans over 62.5 / to score a touchdown. And I wonder. We keep waiting for this Bucs team to finally wake up. Oh, they got a win going into the bye. They come out. No. Is it something with this type of ferocity in the matchup and this type of background that can spark something to life and something consistent? And hopefully we see just some more direct and efficient usage of the obvious weapons we keep talking about, whether that's Evans, Godwin, whether that's Rachaad White in the backfield taking more of a stranglehold on the workload. But yes, that's where I lean first up, and I throw back to you.
Well, Oz, to echo that point, the NFL merger, 1970 NFL-AFL merger, that makes this the 53rd season since then. There have been exactly 53 teams to be favored every game through 11 games. The Bucs are 1. In fact, they are the only one with a losing record after being favored. To make it every game favored through 11 games, yet still have a losing record. They're the first ever to do that. To support your Mike Evans tip, he has gone 7 games without a touchdown. That's a career worst. But you can see the Bucs are trying. He was targeted 9 times last week against the Browns. Only had 2 catches for 31 yards. Obviously didn't find the end zone. But it seems they're making a concerted effort to get that engine going again. A guy who you could pen him in for 1,000 yards every season. My tip, I'm going Alvin Kamara. Last couple weeks we've seen his carries dip and his receiving yards go up. I am, for what it's worth, I'm taking him over 28.5 receiving yards at $1.89. But my tip for propaganda is him to go under 12.5 carries for $1.88. He's been at 12 or fewer each of the last 4 games. And then conversely, he's been over 28 receiving yards 5 of the last 6. So I do think it's going to be against the Bucs rush defense that isn't what it was in years past, not the overwhelming dominant force. They're allowing 4.6 yards per carry, but I do think the Bucs offense gets going, especially late. Kamara's going to be touching the ball a lot, but I think it's going to be the utility he's shown in the last month, which is not your traditional handoffs, a lot of stuff in the flat and trying to get him in space.
Yeah, well, Alvin Kamara is the name that came to mind for me. And whilst I didn't go under on the rushing attempts, I've gone under on the rushing yards at $45.5, $88. And again, if you're going to have a punt, please gamble responsibly, gamble within your means. $1.88 to go under 45.5 yards for Alvin Kamara. I don't see this as an efficient day. There is returning big bodies in the middle of that defensive line for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Some of those ferocious run-stopping presences that we've expected and come to know over recent seasons in Tampa Bay. I'm going under 45.5 there. I think Kamara should be fed and featured more in the passing game. I think he still presents, even though we've had some red zone fumbles, as he strived desperately to create a play for a lackluster Saints offense, probably the most lackluster that he's been a part of in his career. But yeah, I'm going under there for Alvin. As we Phil always makes me nervous when you and me seem lockstep in how we expect Monday Night Football to play out.
Yeah, we were feeling pretty good last week. And Laws, I was texting you during a 4th down late in that game where Jonathan Taylor was on 19 carries and you had the over, and Matt Ryan was on 31 pass attempts and you had the under. And I said, buddy, if Ryan throws an incomplete pass here and the game ends, you lose both your bets. But if Jonathan Taylor runs the ball on 4th and 2 and they get stopped, you win both your bets. And it ended up being a split. Margins are that small, which is why we urge you, please, to gamble responsibly, because people put far more time into it than Laz and I, and it's still, more often than not, is a coin flip. It's a fun way to watch the game with vested interest, but vested interest that you're willing to lose, not vested interest where, oh my gosh, what could I win? For example, a punt I took was at $26 for each team to score a touchdown and a field goal in each half. I'm basically donating a unit to the sports book, but if not, then I'll take my wife out to a very nice dinner. But with that, Laws, we say farewell. It has just crossed 10 a.m. in Sydney and Melbourne. I don't know what time it is in Northern Territory or Queensland because they don't change their clocks, and who knows, and we got some quarter time in there. But wherever you're watching, thank you for making us part of your Tuesday, and I hope to see you on Monday Night Football. Our friends at Ford have added another first half chat, so we cut one more commercial break short and see me on the sideline with the microphone, giving you a little bit of insight, eyes and ears on the sideline. Got some great insight from Mike Tomlin last week. I'll look to do the same this week. But this has been the NFL Brekkie Show presented by the Next Gen Ford Everest. Conquer every day with the Next Gen Ford Everest. He is Laurie Horesh. I am Phil Murphy. I got to get to Raymond James Stadium. Thank you for hanging out with us.